Good morning, everyone, and also good morning to those who are viewing via YouTube. In the next 2 weeks, we will talk about China as a security threat from a PNG perspective. So that will be the theme for our next two seminars. We started off with security as a concept in week 2 and week 3, and in week 4 and 5, we'll move on to a state-centric threat, that is China. Everyone is talking about China as a threat, and we've seen what China is now doing in the region. And I believe all of you as well, those in the meeting room, you are following the news, following what's happening, current issues. So we have 7 speakers who will be answering the 7 given questions. Representing Group 1, we'll have Mrs. Alison Quintao. Group 2, we'll have Miss Audrey Yakam. And then Group 3, we'll have Miss Odila Reddy. Group 4, we'll have Miss Michaeline Uro. Group 5, Miss Jemima Kawas. Group 6, Mr. Irai Kaupa. And Group 7, Mr. John Wiener. But we will not follow the chronological or logical order. We are now going with whoever's in the meeting room first. So in that case, we'll start off with Audrey. And once again, the main talk show is if you have any questions or comments, please note it down and share in the discussion forum for this week, the week 3 discussion forum. And the questions are based on Dr. Deng Wazang's article on perceptions of China in the Pacific, stakeholder perceptions, and a book by Wesley Smith and Smith, edited by them on the China alternative. So all the questions are derived from these two particular readings. So without further delay, I now hand over the virtual microphone to our first presenter for this session. That'll be Audrey followed by Odila, followed by John, and then Jemima will go on from there. So Audrey, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Yagura. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Yagura and everyone. So, on behalf of Group 2, I will be presenting in this seminar. So, the question that was assigned to us is ODODS explores the Belt and Road Initiative's impact in PNG. And the question is, how does the BRI enhance PNG's infrastructure development while also raising concerns about debt sustainability and strategic dependency on China? So this chapter discusses Papua New Guinea's decision or the BRI, which or the BRI, which sparked concerns about the intentions, impacts, and sustainability of these of Chinese financial activities in the Pacific. So before I begin, let us look at some key terms. So what is the Belt and Road Initiative? So the Belt and Road Initiative is a Chinese President uh, Xi Jinping's signature foreign policy project, which aims to strengthen China's connectivity with the world. It combines new and old projects, covers an expansive geographic scope, and includes efforts to strengthen hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure, and people-to-people ties, according to Center for Strategic and International Studies NODATE. So the BRI is an umbrella initiative spanning a multitude of projects designed to promote the flow of goods, investment, and people. The new connections fostered by the BRI could reconfigure relationships, reroute economic activity, and shift within and between states. So, what is PNG's national interest in BRI? PNG's national interest lies in obtaining the benefits of Chinese investments in infrastructure projects while minimizing the risk associated with accepting Chinese loans. So we to answer this the main question, um, we've broken down the question into three parts. So to answer the first part, how does BRI enhance PNG's infrastructure development? So according to Odod, a common narrative about BRI is that Chinese investments in the Pacific are often unproductive, white elephants or road to nowhere. So how does BRI enhance PNG's infrastructure development? The BRI can fulfill a crucial need for investment funding in PNG if the funds are used appropriately to finance productive assets, according to Odod 2019. So in 2014, then Papua New Guinea Prime Minister Honorable Peter O'Neill and Chinese President Xi Jinping made a declaration on the opening of a strategic partnership between the two states in Beijing. This means to demonstrate wide-ranging bilateral engagements. However, this agreement was staged under BRI umbrella when O'Neill visited in 2016. This was made possible as the leaders agreed to synergize the BRI with PNG's Development Strategic Plan 2010 to 2030. So in 2017, Papua New Guinea formally signed the BRI and announced new rounds of Chinese finance projects such as road upgrades in New Britain and New Ireland provinces, Sundown Province Industrial Park construction, Eastern Highlands water supply improvement. So projects, especially the overhaul of the road network, could transform Papua New Guinea's economy and delivery of social services, all of which he called PNG's Belt and Road Dream, according to Smith 2017. Also, countries with well-developed infrastructure report higher GDP growth compared to those with outdated systems. This initiative development has established sustainable investments into PNG. Although its alternative approach to this view is that the success of Chinese investments in PNG often depends on the Chinese and PNG partners involved. This means that the success of Chinese investment in PNG is not solely determined by the amount of money invested, but it is heavily influenced by the quality of the relationship between Chinese and PNG actors, their ethical conduct, and their ability to work effectively with local communities. So moving on to the second part of answering the question is concerns on debt sustainability. So on the other end, concerns have been raised about debt sustainability. Another common narrative of BRI is that joining the BRI will leave PNG vulnerable to Chinese influence and offer insufficient development gains. So in the case of debt sustainability for PNG, a research by Lowy Institute stated that large-scale BRI projects often involve sustainable loans, substantial loans, raising concerns about PNG's ability to repay them, according to Raja 2019. So PNG owed China an amount approximately 555 million. So this may lead to fears of a debt trap, causing a struggle for the PNG government to repay. So the debt vulnerabilities, as a report from a World Bank highlights that debt financing will significantly increase. So the concern is that if PNG becomes too concern is the So the concern is that if PNG becomes too in-depth to China, the country may become vulnerable to Chinese influence, meaning China could exploit a nation's debt to extract political influence or economic advantages. However, alternative approach states that joining the BRI could generate development gains for PNG if the funds are appropriately used. So finally, moving to the third part is concerns on strategic dependency on China. So the third common narrative is that BRI is centralized and the Chinese Communist Party driven strategy with geopolitical aims. So it may entrap partner countries in unstable debt as a form of debt trap diplomacy. So the concerns around PNG strategic dependency on China may have a geopolitical influence, economic and political leverage. So although given alternative approach is that the BRI is more fragmented than initially believed. The aims may be geopolitical or commercial depending on the actors involved. This means that the BRI isn't a single perfectly controlled project and many different Chinese groups like companies and banks are involved, not just the government. So some groups might be focused on China gaining political influence in a region or geopolitical aims, while others just want to make money or commercial aims. So the BRI's purpose changes depending on who's doing the investing. So in summary, although BRI enhances the development of infrastructure in PNG, it also raises concerns about sustainability and strategic dependency on China. So for PNG's long-term development and sovereignty, the government should consider to balance these benefits while also considering possible risks. Thank you, and that's all from Group 2.
Thank you, Group 2, and thank you, Audrey. If you have any questions or comments for them, you can share in our discussion forum. And the BRI, it's up to each one of you as future journalists and analysts and decision makers or policy makers to read what the BRI is about and then develop your own perspective or opinion. And this is from Odor, but there are others who have also contributed to the literature on BRI. We have Graham Smith, and you have Denghua Zhang, and a lot of other scholars. So make sure you read and then you develop your own perspective or opinion about what the Belt and Road Initiative is about and whether or not it will benefit the country. Thank you, Group 2 and Audrey. Now we move on to Miss Rennie, Odila Rennie, representing Group number 3. And using Mr. Gimme Sever's account, sorry.
Good morning, Mr. Yegira and everyone. I will be presenting on behalf of Group 3. So the question reads, Zhang highlights that Pacific Islanders perceive China as both a development partner and a source of concern due to issues like debt, sovereignty, and governance. How can Pacific Island nations navigate these dual perceptions to maximize benefit from Chinese engagement while safeguarding their political and economic independence? So before answering the question, we need to understand what it means. So basically, to simplify, Zhang highlights that Pacific Islanders see China as both a helpful partner and a potential problem because of issues like debt and control. Now, Pacific nations are drawn to China's large development assistance, offering infrastructure and economic opportunities often said to be unmatched to traditional partners. However, they have particular concerns regarding the increase in debts associated with China's loans, potential infringements on sovereignty, and concerns about governance practices, creating a delicate balancing act. Island nations have bilateral relations with China and are heavily reliant on Chinese investment or aids and grants. However, these nations are independent and sovereign, and therefore they have the power to negotiate deals and formulate policies that will safeguard their political and economic independence. Okay, so how can these small Pacific nations maximize benefits while safeguarding their independence? The three strategies, there are other many strategies, but we've only chosen three to present. So firstly, enhanced transparency and rigorous due diligence are crucial when negotiating loans and agreements, meaning that when you're discussing loans or deals, it's vital to be completely open and honest about all the details. And you also need to thoroughly investigate everything involved to make sure it's a good and safe agreement. Basically, be upfront and do your homework before signing anything. The second one is maintaining diverse international partners. Diversifying partnerships beyond China is also important. Leverage existing relationships with Australia, New Zealand, the US, and others to create a more balanced geopolitical landscape. So, in other words, it's important for countries to not rely too heavily on China for partnerships, whether those are for trade, security, or other areas. Instead, they should strengthen and expand their relationships with other countries like Australia, New Zealand, and the US. And by doing this, they can create a more stable and fair situation in the world where no single country has too much power or influence. The third way is to strengthen regional cooperation through bodies like the Pacific Islands Forum, which can provide a unified front in negotiating with China, amplifying individual nations' voices. In simple terms, this idea suggests that Pacific Island countries, by working together through organizations like the Pacific Island Forum, can gain more power when dealing with China. Think of it like this: individually, each island nation might have a hard time being heard or getting a good deal. However, by uniting and speaking with a single voice, they can negotiate more effectively and have a stronger overall influence on the relationship. This collaborative approach allows them to amplify their individual concerns and interests, leveling the playing field when engaging with a major global power like China. So, an example of a Pacific nation that maximizes benefits from China while protecting its political and economic independence is Solomon Islands. According to Iroga 2024, in 2019, the Solomon Islands switched allegiance from Taiwan to China, joining the Belt and Road Initiative. And the diplomatic tie between China and Solomon Islands has benefited the country over the last 5 years in terms of infrastructure, such as the world-class game facility in Solomon Islands, and also benefited the social infrastructure such as health, education, and the national security. To conclude, while Pacific Island nations see China as a significant contributor towards development assistance, they must navigate concerns about debt, sovereignty, and governance, basically through enhancing transparency and being diligent, maintaining diverse international partners, and strengthening regional cooperation. The island nations, being independent and sovereign, have the power to negotiate deals that protect their political and economic independence. And there are several other strategies that can be implemented, like I stated at first, aside from the three mentioned in the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rani and Group 3, if you have any questions or comments, likewise, please make sure you share in our discussion forum for this week. So, a very interesting answer with the three approaches. I like the enhanced transparency approach. That is important. We have to make sure that whatever deals that we cut, whatever negotiations that we enter into, there's transparency and we're sharing details that our citizens need to know, and it's based on national interest. So I like that too. We can discuss further in our discussion forum. Let's move on to the next presenter for this morning, Mr. Rina, John representing Group 7.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Aguirre and everyone. Sorry. Sorry. Good morning, Mr. Aguirre and everyone. My name is John Rina, and I will be representing Group 7 for this seminar. So for Group 7, the question given to us was, it states that Matbob highlights the cultural differences between Chinese traders and local communities. How do these cultural tensions impact social stability, and what strategies should be employed to foster better relationships between Chinese businesses and local communities? So our group, we have divided the questions into two parts to answer them accordingly. So for the first part of the question, it states, how do these cultural tension between Chinese traders and local PNG communities impact social stability? In chapter 15 of the China alternative book titled On the Ground Tensions with Chinese Traders in Papua New Guinea, Patrick Matbob examines the cultural differences contributing to tensions between Chinese traders and local Papua New Guinean communities. And some of these key cultural differences highlighted include: one, work ethic and business practices. Chinese traders prioritize efficiency, profit, and business expansion, often exhibiting strong work ethics and operating on long hours. As for PNG local communities, while industrious, they are deeply committed to cultural and familial obligations, which diverts time and resources away from business activities, often putting more value into communal obligations such as the one-talk system, which can affect business growth. The second point is community engagement and social integration. Chinese traders often remain isolated, leading to perceptions of detachment. They tend to maintain a degree of social separation from local communities to put more focus on their businesses. As for PNG communities, however, they expect businesses to participate in social and cultural events. They tend to value communal relationships and social interrelations with business practices linked with community engagement. The next one is perceptions of wealth and competition. Chinese traders dominate retail sectors, leading to economic tensions where PNG locals often feel disadvantaged in competing with Chinese businesses. This is often framed within the broader context of globalization and economic development. Chinese businesses are sometimes perceived as having an unfair advantage due to their access to capital networks and support from the Chinese government. Hayes 2022. The next one is legal and ethical standards. Some Chinese traders are accused of selling substandard goods, and PNG communities expect businesses to adhere to local laws and ethical norms. To add on to that, to what I have stated, Papua New Guinea locals may feel unable to compete with Chinese traders. The Chinese are admired for their dedication, but also face resentment and jealousy, which can sometimes escalate into social instability. And some of these may include indigenous challenges, where PNG shop owners face cultural pressures to share wealth, leading many to sell or rent businesses to Chinese traders. And the most common one is One Talk system, which is a social network that promotes communal values but hinders business growth due to obligations like supporting relatives and cultural events. The next one is risk and jealousy. Successful business people often face risk of sabotage and violence due to jealousy. Thus, these cultural differences often contribute to tensions between Chinese traders and local PNG communities. Now, moving on to the second part of the question, what strategies should be employed to foster better relationships between Chinese businesses and local communities? So we have 3 points listed down here. The first one is increase engagement with local communities. Chinese businesses must increase their engagement with local communities. This can be in regard to sponsoring events and other entertainment activities that will engage the local community. This encourages Chinese businesses to not only focus on maximizing its profits, but also to contribute to social responsibility and goodwill, which in turn will build a good reputation of Chinese businesses with the locals. The second point is establishing a transparent communication hub. A transparent communication hub should be established between the Chinese businesses and local communities, whereby both the Chinese and Papua New Guineans go to for transparent communication between one another. Most of the issues that arise between the Chinese businesses and PNG local communities is due to ineffective communication. Through establishing a communication hub, the locals would know who to approach to address their concerns or issues transparently, and the Chinese would also be able to convey their concerns clearly and effectively. That way, there's trust and transparency between both parties. And for the third and last point is awareness programs. Awareness programs should be carried out to enlighten local Papua New Guinean residents of Chinese intervention in their local communities. When local people know what is happening and why there's Chinese presence in their communities, there is less tension between both parties as there is mutual understanding. When the locals don't know what is happening, there is resentment, thus stirring tension between both groups. Hence, awareness programs must always be carried out in local communities when there's intervention by Chinese businesses. So, in conclusion, the article focuses on the impact of Chinese investment and migration on Papua New Guinea, highlighting several cultural clashes and their effect on social stability. The negative portrayal of Chinese migrants in the media further fuels negative perceptions and contributes to social instability. These factors combined create a complex and unstable social environment for both parties. As for Papua New Guineans, having a large number of relatives and tribes people can guarantee a business person cheap labor and security. However, he or she is expected to reciprocate by contributing to cultural feasts, ceremonies, and funeral expenses and support the education and health of relatives. Cultural obligations can affect the success of an enterprise and distract business people from concentrating on their businesses as much as the Chinese would. That is all from our Group 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Group 7, and thank you, John. A really interesting answer. There's a lot to digest and break down and continue further discussion. I will leave that to you people and we'll do that in the discussion forum. But there's one point that I just want to make mention, work ethics. John talked about work ethics. The Chinese now, they have they have a new system. It's called 996. So they wake up in the morning, by 9 o'clock, they should start work, and by 9 o'clock in the night, they end work and they have 6 hours of sleep. So if you relate that back to the work ethics, they work really hard from 9 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock in the night, and then they have 6 hours of sleep. And with this type of work ethics and system in place, you would expect the country to grow rapidly in the next 10 to 20 years. So that's something for us to note. The other one is one talk system. John talked about one talk system. The Chinese do have their own one talk system. It's called Guanxi, a friend of a friend. If you want to help someone, then you go through the network. Go through the networks and you help them. You work with them and share whatever you need to share. It's something similar to one talk system. Guanxi, Guanxi. So if you have time, you look at 996 and Guanxi. Do more reading on that. All right, thank you, Group 7 and Mr. Wina. We now move on to Ms. Kawas. Ms. Kawas will be representing Group 5. Jemima, please go ahead. Ms. Kawas, check your microphone. Maybe you have a similar issue with
Okay. Mr. Alius Irons.
That's fine, go ahead.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I will be presenting on behalf of Group 5. Our question reads, Kabutalaka emphasized the importance of Blue Pacific narrative in fostering regional solidarity amidst growing external interest. How can Pacific Island leaders utilize this narrative to resist the pressure of great power competition, particularly between China and the West? Before answering that question, let us first understand what Blue Pacific narrative is. According to Kabutalaka 2021, Blue Pacific narrative provides a counter-narrative for the Pacific regionalism and a strategy to counter the dominance of global powers. This is pertinent in a rapidly changing region, where powerful countries compete to map Oceania into their boundaries of influence. The Blue Pacific narrative was endorsed by the Pacific Island Forum in 2017. It gives Pacific Islanders the conceptual tools to assert themselves in regional and global discussions. The Blue Pacific is therefore both a narrative and a strategy for assertive diplomacy. In the article, we can see how power competition between China and the West are pursued through the use of counter-mapping and counter-narrative. And these two concepts, as proposed, suggest that the Pacific region has been used through ages as a landmass or a region that is perceived as free to control and exert influence on. Kabutalaka states that this concept of counter-mapping by cartographers, maps do not just create legibility. They also make spaces become invisible by omitting or marginalizing them. He further states that the counter-mapping allowed for the shift in securing landmass to ensuring that national interest was secured through this concept of mapping. Now, to answer our question, how can Pacific Island leaders utilize this narrative to resist the pressure of great power competition, particularly between China and the West? The Blue Pacific, or the narrative, offers a variety of perspectives about the Pacific that empower and strengthen regionalism. It also emphasizes how important the Pacific Ocean is to the area's shared identities, geographies, linkage, and obligations. The concept itself is a new, and it offers ways for the Pacific to lead or navigate the Pacific Ocean without pressure from great powers. This narrative could be used to resist the pressure of great powers by the first point is regional cooperation. The narrative can foster regional cooperation to ensure that Pacific Island nations work together for mutual benefits, interests, consents, and priorities for the region. The second one, enhance growth through sustainability, encompasses the idea that the region has to protect the Pacific Ocean and the resources that come from it. This will ensure that the region practices sustainable development to support its citizens. The third point is respecting regional sovereignty for each state. Ensures that leaders from Pacific Island nations are respected as representatives of sovereign states and can make decisions for their states to limit the force of external powers of Western states. The fourth point is promoting neutrality and strategic partnerships. The narrative allows Pacific nations to adopt a friends to all, enemies to none approach, avoiding alignment with any single power. Leaders can expand partnership by engaging with middle powers like Japan, India, and the European Union, reducing dependency on China or Western nations. One classic example for this is what Fiji has done to balance the relationship with both China and traditional partners like Australia and New Zealand, influencing competition to secure development aid and infrastructure projects. That is according to Tad and Baker 2024. Moving on, engaging in a collaborative manner in securing the current and emerging interests of the Pacific. The maritime security of the region, which is an aspect under the Blue Pacific narrative. For example, the rise in climate change threats to the outermost vulnerable islands and the need to practice sustainable living for islanders. As stated by Naumia 2018, with climate change finally being more widely recognized as an immediate and pressing priority, our region will quickly become a hub for international climate change research and a focus for debates around conservation and resource management. Therefore, the Pacific may use the Blue Pacific narrative by initiating a global focus on climate change to strengthen the collaboration of a Pacific region initiative that shifts the focus of China and the West geopolitical interests to addressing the Pacific region long-term interests. The Pacific Islands can utilize the Pacific Island Forum, the Council of Regional Organizations of Pacific, and Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program to restructure the approach they have towards engaging with external powers. These organizations should elaborate collaborate as a united regional power in securing interest and stable relationship where they are able to make collective decisions that supersede the manipulation of external powers. In conclusion, by uniting under the Blue Pacific narrative, Pacific Island leaders can amplify their voices on the global stage, protect their sovereignty, and navigate the complexities of great power competition without compromising their regional solidarity or shared values. This approach not only strengthens their position, but also ensures that their unique challenges and priorities remain at the forefront of international discourse. Pacific Island leaders can uphold their sovereignty and regional unity, which helps them resist the influence of major global powers like China and the West. This narrative allows them to tell their own stories, create a united regional identity, and engage in assertive diplomacy. By leveraging the geopolitical competition, they can also maximize their aid and development options without being drawn into the rivalry between major powers. Thank you, and that is all from Group 5.
Thank you, Jemima and Group 5. I hope all of you have taken note of what they've presented. Especially, they also contribute towards us understanding what the Blue Pacific narrative is, and take note of the 4 points, that they've shared with us, or the 4 approaches. And if you have any questions, comments, please share in our discussion forum for this week. Now let us move on to our next presenter, Mrs. Quintao, representing Group 1.
Okay, good day to you all, Mr. Yegiora and my colleagues from PG and CA. Before I present on behalf of Group 1, just bring everyone's attention to a brief history on PNG's connection with China. And this dates back to the 15th century through the arrival of the Bird of Paradise hunters and the subsequent shipment of Chinese laborers to work in German plantations in the 1800s. And more traders came and settled here years later in search of business opportunities. And Chin 2008 estimated their numbers around 20,000, but that figure the group believes it could have grown with the influx of Chinese migrants, citizens, and businesses coming in since PNG and China endorsed formal ties in 1976. So our question for this seminar, Matt Bob discusses the on-the-ground tensions with Chinese traders in PNG. How do these tensions highlight the potential for social conflict, and what implications do they have for viewing China's economic presence as a security threat? Okay, the group's response is in 2 parts. To answer the first part of the question, how do these tensions highlight the potential for social conflict? The group discovered the tensions with the Chinese traders reportedly surfaced after independence with the entry of new Chinese migrants seeking economic opportunities here as the old Chinese settlers moved to Australia. Matt Bob highlights the general feeling of uneasiness among Papua New Guineans then led to conflicts like land disputes experienced in Rabaul, where most Chinese lived. And the group found out that such tensions are still experienced today as more Chinese migrants with no formal education and skill set are taking over jobs, and small businesses reserved only for nationals, thus creating social conflict among our people and the foreigners. Concerns over exploitation of locals, workplace harassment and abuse, underpayment of wages, and discrimination have also made it in the media. They stem from economic disparities, cultural differences, and perceptions of unfair competition leading to resentment and social unrest. Business Standard 2014 published an article about how frustrated Kurumbukari land owners assaulted 5 Chinese working at the mine and damaged heavy machinery, which resulted in the temporary closure of the Ramu nickel mine. Loss of resource ownership through project areas is another cause of concern, where communities are reportedly being exploited by foreigners, which lead to tensions like land disputes, fights, and disagreements over land and resource rights. Okay, for the second question, what implications do they have for viewing Chinese economic presence as a security threat? The group shares that China's economic presence brought both development and investment opportunities to our country, including infrastructure, project aid from China for roads and major facilities, the Ramu nickel project I mentioned earlier, and China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, signed in 2018. Now, PNG opted for this because the Australian aid to PNG concentrated on building the capacity of human resource and strengthening its governance system, while China's aid was geared towards building infrastructures. Matt Bob discussed PNG's unstable political, economic, and social situation, its chronic law and order problems, and its widespread corruption in all levels of government pose the biggest challenges to our country's development aspirations. Lack of governance also further hindered effective implementation of projects and delivery of government services to the rural population. Australia and US heavily criticized the BRI signing, which they claimed put PNG at risk of debt trap diplomacy, which Doherty 2019 defined as a situation in which a creditor country, in the case of China, intentionally lends excessive credit to a smaller debtor country to attract economic or political concessions when the smaller country, as in our case, PNG, cannot service the loan. So both view China as a rising power and threat to PNG, raising concerns that China could use our country as a strategic location to build a military base or sign a security agreement. To conclude, we highlight the growing economic influence of China in PNG is a grave security threat, as China's economic activities are growing with its strategic interests. Chinese state-owned enterprises and the Belt and Road Initiative can be perceived as tools for expanding its geographical influence. This dual nature of economic engagement, both development and strategic, threatens PNG's sovereignty and its political and economic independence. These dynamics do underscore the complexity of China's role in PNG, where economic opportunities are weighed against potential risks to social stability and national security. The group consequently believes there's no balance between economic development and the maintenance of our national interest, as PNG is struggling financially with China dominating the country's economic sector. Thank you. That's all from Group 1.
Thank you, Group 1, and thank you, Mrs. Quintao, for representing the group. I do agree with the closing statement. China dominates the retail and wholesale sector of the economy. So that's something that is a major challenge to all of us, Papua New Guineans, especially you people, future policy makers and journalists and analysts, to have a serious look at how we are implementing our policies, our guidelines, and make sure we create space or opportunity for Papua New Guineans to rise up and compete or cooperate or work with the Chinese to help grow our economy. Let's move on to Group 6. Let's listen to Mr. Kaupat, Irai Kaupat, representing Group 6, and then we'll conclude with Ms. Uro. If you have questions, comments for our presenters so far, Mrs. Quintao and All the others, make sure you share in our discussion forum. Mr. Kaupa, please go ahead.
Good morning, all. I will be presenting on behalf of Group 6, and the question allocated to us was, Zheng's research suggests that civil society stakeholders hold nuanced views about China's Belt and Road Initiative and foreign aid. How can these stakeholders influence their government's decision to ensure that Chinese-led projects align with local needs and long-term sustainability goals? In order to better understand the questions, I'll clarify on what China's Belt and Road Initiative and foreign aid is. According to McBride et al. 2023, China's Belt and Road Initiative and foreign aid, also known as the BRI, is an international economic and infrastructure development plan that was launched in 2013 by President Xi Jinping. This strategy is referred to as the New Silk Road and aims to improve international trade and investment beyond Asia, Africa, and Europe. Papua New Guinea was one of the first countries in the Pacific to join the BRI in 2018. Some of the current China-PNG relations under the BRI includes infrastructure development like roads, bridges, airports, and ports, energy and resource centers such as mines and natural resources, digital and communications like underwater sea fiber, optic cables, and broadband networking, and economic trade cooperation, of course, where China is our biggest trading partner. With that being said, the question directed to our group is, how can these stakeholders influence their government's decisions to ensure that Chinese-led projects align with local needs and long-term sustainability goals? According to Zheng's research, the stakeholders as mentioned in this question refers to organizations and groups like NGOs, community groups, and local activists. Basically, the people who may have complex opinions about the BRI and its foreign aid policy. One of the most logical and practical ways that stakeholders can influence their government's decision is through policy formulation. Chinese-led projects in the Pacific Island countries are bound to take place, especially with countries like Papua New Guinea, which is already a member of the BRI. Therefore, the next best thing to do is to ensure that the BRI is aligned with local needs and long-term sustainability goals. There are several key steps in formulating policies, and they include identifying the issue, gathering information, goal and objective setting, stakeholder engagement, and implementation and evaluation. Policymakers themselves are stakeholders in government decisions, and with careful consideration, they can be able to formulate a policy that is well informed and addresses the best interest of local needs. Zheng 2022 mentioned that a notable weakness in China's influence originates from the lack of concern from non-government players in developing countries. AFE 2017 also emphasizes that policies, especially in the Pacific, often lack a strong connection to the society they affect. This separation leads to a democratic and development gap that needs to be confronted with ongoing development efforts. Furthermore, if policymakers can engage civil society in a policy that holds the Chinese government accountable for the BRI projects, it would likely ensure that Chinese-led projects align with local needs. Civil society stakeholders play an important role in helping their government with decision-making to ensure that these Chinese-led projects must be in line with the local needs and long-term sustainability goals. Stakeholders act as middlemen for the government and the local communities. They consult communities and report back to the government on how to make decisions that will be beneficial to both parties. Some of the ways these stakeholders could formulate effective policies to enable their government in guaranteeing that Chinese-led projects meet local needs and support long-term sustainability is through gathering community and public opinion through organized events, sharing of information through studies and surveys, making proposals that focus on local priorities, advocating for environmental protection, and engaging with the media to raise awareness about local needs and issues related to Chinese project. An example of the BRI aligning with Papua New Guinea's long-term development goals, LTTP, and medium-term development plan, MTDP of 2023 to 2027 is the alignment of the Connect PNG program of 2020 to 2040. This program aligns with PNG's LTTP 2030 under the category of infrastructure development, which aims to enhance national connectivity, boost trade, agriculture, and industry through the development of roads, highway bridges, and airports. Generally, infrastructure development and digital connectivity to enable smoother distribution and transport for goods and services and communication development. To conclude, civil society stakeholders play a pivotal role in ensuring that the BRI projects in Papua New Guinea and the Pacific region meet local needs and goals. By participating in policy formulation, stakeholders can help collect data, set goals, and involve communities, therefore promoting accountability and transparency. This process helps to make sure that infrastructure projects benefit local populations and align with long-term goals. Therefore, collaboration between civil society stakeholders and the government is vital for ensuring that Chinese-led projects do not only address immediate infrastructure needs, but also support long-term prosperity in the Pacific. I'll stop here, and that is all from Group 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaupa. Very insightful presentation. I hope all of you have taken note of what you said. In terms of stakeholders, we need also more civil society or NGO groups formed by you young people, future leaders of this country, to hold accountable the government as well as multinational corporations and other investments led by donor partners. If we have more of this type of organizations, then we are critical of what they're doing, and is it in line with our national interest, our medium-term development strategy or plan, or Vision 2050? That's something for people to think about. Let's conclude with our final presenter for this seminar session, Seminar 3, and that is Ms. Michaeline Uro, representing Air Group, Group 4. Michaeline, please go.
Good day and hello everyone. I am representing the Group 4. Wesley Smith and Smith argue that the Pacific Islands are caught in the crossfire of great power competition. How can Pacific Island states, including PNG, leverage the strategic competition between China and Western powers to their advantage without compromising the sovereignty? Before we begin on to answering the major question, let us understand a key term: great power competition. According to Shehu 2024, great power competition refers to geopolitical scenario where several power nations, often considered as great powers, actively strive to gain relative influence and dominance over one another on a global scale by utilizing various means like military strength, economic power, diplomacy, and technological advancements to achieve their strategic goals, which sometimes leads to competition across multiple arenas like trade, security, and ideology. Examples of historical great power competition include pre-World War I, competition between Britain, France, Germany, and Russia, which led up to the World War I. Cold War, which is the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. In the current context rivalry, the term great power competition is often used to describe the growing strategic competition between the United States and China, encompassing economic, military, and technological spheres. Now on to the answering of the main question. How can Pacific Island states, including PNG, leverage the strategic competition between China and Western powers to their advantage without compromising their sovereignty? According to Keane and Tidwell 2024, the traditional donors to Pacific Island nations are primarily Australia, New Zealand, Japan, France, and the United States, now competing with China for geopolitical influence in the Pacific Islands. The Pacific Island leaders are concerned because the rivalry could lead to a military buildup or be used for strategic purposes. To avoid choosing sides, the leaders of the Pacific Island nations have made it clear repeatedly that they highly value open, honest relationships and long-lasting, inclusive partnerships both within the region and globally. Therefore, the friends to all approach is widely accepted, and some Pacific Island countries have formally committed to it by remaining neutral and not aligning with any major power. For example, the policy approach, friends to all, enemies to none, has thus worked successfully for Papua New Guinea for a long time. According to Wesley Smith, Pacific Island states, including PNG, face a delicate balancing act as they navigate the escalating great power competition between China and Western powers like the United States and Australia. While they must contend with external pressures from competing superpowers, these states can strategically leverage the geopolitical position to maximize benefits for their own development, security, and sovereignty. Based on the group's discussion, here's how they can do so. 1. Leveraging climate change diplomacy. Climate change is one area where Pacific Island states have a distinct and urgent global voice. By framing their relationships with both China and Western powers around climate action, they can demand increased assistance in adaptation, mitigation, and resilience building projects, while ensuring these initiatives respect their sovereignty and long-term environmental goals. Two actionable steps to take are focused on green diplomacy, engage both China and Western powers in promoting green energy and climate change resilience projects. China's growing leadership in renewable energy technologies and the West desires to address global climate challenges provides an opportunity for mutually beneficial partnership. The second actionable step is leverage international support for climate change. By positioning themselves as global leaders in climate change advocacy, Pacific Island states can garner international support, including financial aid, technology transfer, and climate change adaptation strategies from both sides of the Great Power competition. For example, Vanuatu's 2018 National Policy on Climate Change and Disaster Displacement includes planned relocation to help communities face climate change. Second is diversifying diplomatic relations. Pacific Island states should continue to maintain diverse diplomatic relationships with both China and Western powers, ensuring that they are not overly dependent on any single country. By engaging multiple great powers, these nations can negotiate favorable agreements in trade, investment, and security. This approach would allow them to extract the best benefits from both sides, whether it's Chinese investment in infrastructure or access to Western markets and security arrangements. One actionable step is to maximize economic and infrastructure opportunities. Both China and Western powers are offering substantial economic and infrastructure development packages. Pacific Island states can use this as leverage by demanding higher quality projects, ensuring that these investments benefit their long-term economic development and preserving their sovereignty over resources and infrastructure. For instance, PNG has benefited from Chinese investments in infrastructure projects such as roads, bridges, and ports under Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. At the same time, PNG continues to receive aid, trade partnerships, and security cooperation from Australia and the US. Through these relationships, PNG can secure economic development while also ensuring its national security and maintaining diplomatic flexibility. Third, focus on regional cooperation and multilateralism. Pacific Island states can strengthen their position by working together as a bloc through regional organizations like the Pacific Island Forum. Hence, engaging in multilateral diplomacy, they can present a united front, ensuring that their collective interests are prioritized over the interests of individual great powers. In multilateral forums, Pacific Island leaders can advocate for shared priorities such as climate change action, sustainable development, and economic independence while avoiding being caught in the crossfire of the US-China rivalry, King and Tidwell 2024. In conclusion, Pacific Island states, including PNG, can leverage the great power competition between China and Western countries to their advantage by diversifying their foreign relations, securing economic investment which enhances security partnership, and promoting climate change diplomacy, all while ensuring they maintain their sovereignty. By carefully navigating this complex geopolitical landscape, Pacific Island leaders can secure the national interest without succumbing to undue external influence or compromising their independence. Thank you, and that's from the group 4.
All right, thank you, Group 1, Ms. Uro. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. One interesting point that Ms. Uro shared with us, apart from the other two approaches that they also shared in the answer, is regional cooperation. Regional cooperation is very important. We need to work with our regional partners. We also share similar issues, similar problems right across Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, PNG, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu. So we need to work with them through the Pacific Islands Forum. So that's something all of us should continue to advocate. So through the forum, we will address the China threat issue, and through the forum, we'll address climate change as well. So that's something for you future policymakers and leaders to consider. So we've heard from our 7 presenters representing the 7 groups, and if you have any questions, comments, please utilize the forum for this week to share your comments or your questions. And I hope you're taking note of one major point after going through all the presentation. There's a power difference, power relations. We call it asymmetric and symmetric. There's asymmetric power relations between us, PNG, and China, meaning China is the larger power when we look at our bilateral relations compared to Australia. So for us, we more or less have a symmetric relations with Solomon Islands and Vanuatu because they are our peers and we are kind of equal in terms of power, size, and what we possess, elements that make up national power. But if you compare PNG with China and Australia, New Zealand, America, we are no match to these great powers. And they're at that level where they're competing because of certain elements of national power that they have developed, their navy, their national character, national moral, the position, the economy, and all this, the population. So you see there's this differences between power, or we call it asymmetric and symmetric power relations. So that's something that all of us should note, and we'll continue on the discussion next week. Week 5, we have questions that are related to the 2 main readings, so we'll continue the discussion next week on China as a security threat. But like I mentioned repeatedly, verbally, and as well as in written form, that you yourself as future policymakers and leaders of the country and citizens of this country, PNG, you need to develop your own perspective as to whether or not you think China is a security threat or China is a genuine development partner, whether the BRI will help us connect what must be to Alatau or to Popondetta to Morobe to the islands region where we need to seriously think about road connections to grow our economy and encourage more farming activities. So will the BRI do that, or will Australia and New Zealand step in to take charge and give more money for us to build roads? So that's something for you to think about and continue to discuss. But we'll meet again next week, and I thank all the 7 presenters, and I thank the group as well for spending time to put together your answers and going through the meetings. So that's all. You all have a good day, and we'll meet again on Thursday for our guest lecture at 6 p.m. Okay, all have a good day. Bye for now.